The story opens in Ilmgard, a continent split among 5 kingdoms as someone steadily climbs a long staircase. A crowned young noble jolts awake in a grand chair pulled from a daze by a sudden shock. The narration reveals that every royal bloodline on the continent traces back to one man. That man is introduced as Evan Verlaine, a notorious noble heir gifted with mind reading, surrounded by women in a courtly scene thick with tension. The instant he hears the name Evan Verlaine, he repeats it in disbelief as the identity hits him. He finds himself on the palace floor, staring ahead in confusion as he tries to process the unfamiliar royal chamber around him. Still reeling, he mutters under his breath and wonders where he is. A furious blonde noblewoman suddenly declares that she is breaking off their engagement. She warns that this is only the beginning and tells him to brace himself for what comes next, while the hall falls deathly silent. Trying to steady himself, he questions what is happening and reasons that he had been at work only moments ago, wondering if an earthquake caused this. Staring at the blonde noblewoman, he panics over the talk of a broken engagement and cannot understand what she is saying as he desperately tries to figure out who she is. Around the hall, noblewomen whisper that the princess has finally made her decision and complain that even if men are rare, there is still a limit to how rude one can be. As he scans the lavish chamber, he is overwhelmed by the palace setting, the elegant dresses, and the crowd's chatter. And he starts wondering where he is. Looking down at himself, he blurts out in confusion over the strange clothes he is wearing. Staring at his hands, he is struck by the horrifying realization that this body might not be his. Facing the princess on the throne in the grand hall, he spirals deeper into confusion and desperately wonders what is happening and where he has ended up. The shock deepens when he realizes the situation feels exactly like one of those reincarnation stories. The princess coldly addresses him as Evan Verlaine and tells him that if he has something to say, she will hear it. Trying to stay respectful, he awkwardly apologizes and says she must have mistaken him for someone else. Narrowing her eyes, the princess presses him and demands to know who he claims to be instead. He nervously explains that he is Takayuki Shinohara, a librarian at the city library, and insists that until just a minute ago, that had been his life. His mind flashes back to the city library, where he had been quietly working among the shelves and children before everything changed. The memory sharpens around 32-year-old Takayuki Shinohara as he carries a stack of books through the library on an ordinary day. In the middle of that routine, violent shaking suddenly tears through the library, forcing him to react as the shelves begin to rattle around him. Realizing it is an earthquake, he turns an alarm just as a girl screams and loses her footing in the chaos. He sees books and shelves crashing down above the child, and the danger hits him in an instant. Without hesitation, he throws himself over the girl to shield her as debris slams down, while a looming figure approaches through the confusion. Returning to the present, he says he knows it sounds insane, but all he remembers is trying to save that little girl during the earthquake. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. Looking down on him coldly, she says his excuse is unbearable and pathetic, then declares that if he claims to have forgotten, she will remind him of the crime he committed. The princess coldly lists his offenses, saying he confined a maid for months over spilled tea, punished and overworked her beyond reason, lashed out at an attendant who touched him while helping him dress, and even threw a vase at her, adding that only his noble status kept such disgraceful conduct from being punished sooner. Clenching her fist, she says that even if he despised women, they believed marriage might eventually reform him, but he still crossed a line. She erupts in fury and accuses him of going so far as to try to poison her. He freezes in shock, only able to repeat the word poison in disbelief. The narration reveals that a poison tester died in her place and that death became proof that the princess had narrowly escaped being murdered. She declares that as the Duke's only heir, he probably thought no one could punish him, but makes it clear he no longer has any value to her. With absolute finality, the princess announces that she will instead marry the third prince of a neighboring kingdom. Watching from the side, the attendants realize the rumors were true and quietly identify her as that prince's intended bride. Looking down at him, the princess asks Evan whether he still has anything left to say for himself. Cornered and overwhelmed, he awkwardly stammers out hesitant congratulations to Her Highness. The cup shatters across the floor, and the sudden crash makes him stare up in alarm. Pointing at him in outrage, the princess orders the insolent man to be thrown into prison at once. The armored guards right away obey and seize him as they acknowledge her command. Panicking, he hurriedly tells them to wait. As he is dragged away, He blurts out that he is not the person they are calling Evan. The guards shut him down at once, telling him resistance is futile and ordering him to stop struggling. Held tightly between the two guards, he grows visibly flustered as the situation turns awkward and impossible to escape. Overwhelmed by the close pressure, he panics internally and wonders why they are crowding him so much. Trying to think fast, he realizes events are spiraling far too quickly and worries that if this continues, his situation will only get worse. As they keep hold of him, he notices them muttering under their breath, and the atmosphere grows increasingly strange and uncomfortable. As the guards pin him in place, a violent shock runs through him and his whole body jerks in alarm. At the same time, he overhears two disturbing voices muttering unsettling thoughts, making the atmosphere deeply uncomfortable. Startled, he freezes and wonders if he really just heard someone say that. One guard sharply orders him to keep walking and stop looking around, while another voice keeps fixating on him in a way that makes the situation even more uncomfortable. The guards accuse him of trying to poison the princess and warn him to prepare himself, even as one of them reacts to his frightened expression in a way that feels increasingly disturbing. Hearing that, he grows uneasy and wonders if they are seriously thinking such things. Dragged between the two armored women, he looks trapped as they keep him restrained, and the pressure around him becomes impossible to ignore. As they move through the corridor, he realizes there are two separate voices and cannot understand why both of them are saying such disturbing things. A moment later, he is thrown into a prison cell, and the heavy lock snaps shut behind him. Left alone at last, he exhales shakily and decides to piece together everything he knows so far. As he reviews what he has heard, he learns that Evan Verlaine was a high noble's son, once engaged to the first princess, and that his reputation painted him as violently abusive and deeply hostile toward women. Looking at his own hand, he realizes with disbelief that this body can somehow hear the thoughts of other people. The guard's private thoughts turn openly disturbing as one fixates on his frightened expression and another becomes strangely obsessed, making the whole situation feel deeply uncomfortable. He tries to make sense of their appearance, noticing that despite their armor they still seem quite young, which only leaves him more unsettled by their behavior. Thinking back, he admits he has never even had a girlfriend and wonders whether all girls think like this, or whether he is imagining too much. Sitting alone in the cell, he considers whether this body's unusual nature might be affecting their reactions. He then reasons that if men constantly faced this kind of harassment, it would explain why someone like Evan had come to distrust women. For the moment, he forces himself to stop spiraling and decides that his priority should be finding a way out. Before he can act, a woman arrives outside the bars and addresses him formally as Lord Verlaine. The woman coldly informs him that she is about to explain the punishment awaiting him from this point on. The woman introduces herself as Renee Lafort, a first-rank court official. Renee formally states that she oversees palace categories and handles the knight's affairs, then politely acknowledges Lord Verlaine. As he anxiously wonders what will happen to him, he gets briefly distracted by her appearance and forces himself to refocus. Renee explains that treason against the crown usually ends in death, and she confirms that the poison intended for Her Highness was personally examined and found to be real. Hearing that, he panics and blurts out that a death sentence cannot be happening. The narration clarifies that the death penalty, known as execution by guillotine, is an extremely severe punishment and has not been used in 150 years. Renee adds that sentencing a duke's heir to death is effectively impossible, so that charge has been dropped. She continues that because of his outrageous conduct and disrespect, and because his engagement has now been called off, Her Highness instead demanded that he be sentenced to lifelong servitude, leaving him stunned by the term. He is horrified as the implication sinks in, thinking this absurd world is turning into something unbearable, yet realizing he would still remain a slave regardless. Renee concludes that by ruling of Her Majesty, his punishment has been finalized and he is to be married into the Margrave of Cuvelier's family. He struggles to understand the sentence, asking what it means to be married into the Margrave family and what kind of punishment this is. Renee abruptly shifts the conversation and asks whether Lord Verlaine is a reincarnator from Japan. She reminds him that he mentioned isekai reincarnation stories earlier and reveals that she herself is also a reincarnator. He freezes in shock and asks if she is serious. Renee answers without hesitation that she is completely serious. She asks whether Lord Verlaine regained memories of a past life around the time of his condemnation. He says yes, but explains that it was less like recovering memories and more like his soul suddenly took over this body. Renee repeats his wording in surprise, focusing on the idea that his soul took over. Troubled by that answer, she admits that what he described sounds deeply concerning. He says that to him, this world feels like something straight out of an anime game or a teen novel. Renee explains that she is certain this world is set in the anime game Hanasaku Otome no Kantata, though more than a century seems to have passed since the original story ended. She adds that even the place names and countries match the game exactly, and some people appear to be descendants of the original characters, leaving him stunned. Renee reveals that because the ratio of men to women is about 1 to 99, society itself has become severely distorted. That claim makes him pause in shock, and he realizes he has not seen a single man anywhere. As he processes this from inside the cell, she dryly remarks that most men would probably be thrilled by the idea and imagine themselves suddenly in high demand. Embarrassed, he awkwardly admits that maybe she has a point. She right away warns him not to expect too much, saying he will only end up disappointed. Renee explains that men are so scarce they are overprotected and raised to become arrogant and selfish, especially among the nobility, where she bluntly says many of them are simply awful. From across the bars, she sums up the world harshly, saying most women desperately want men while most men resent women, and that is simply how society functions. After laying out that grim reality, she falls silent, and he lowers his gaze as the weight of her words finally sinks in. Still overwhelmed, he says he is stunned and has no idea what to do, while Renee coolly notes that for someone showing so little, a fellow reincarnator should look more shaken. Trying to steady himself, he decides the only thing left is to wait and see how this unfolds. Renee formally introduces herself, explaining that she has been assigned to watch over and escort Lord Verlaine, and he awkwardly confirms that he will be under her care. Through the prison bars, they cautiously reach out and exchange a hesitant handshake. The instant their hands meet, a sharp jolt seems to pass between them and the air suddenly grows tense. As she looks him over, Renee thinks that even if the Queen approved sending him into that infamous Margrave territory, he does not seem so terrible, and she quietly resolves to do everything she can to keep him safe. Forcing an uneasy smile, he asks her to take good care of him. As the scene shifts, Renee cannot help wondering what the Margrave is really like. The story cuts to the Margrave lands of Cuvelier. In the new location, a cheerful girl runs ahead, excitedly calling out to her older sister. The two women return and announce themselves, with the cheerful one calling to Marielle and Agnes that they are back. Marielle and Agnes face the returning pair in front of the corpse of a massive monster, a grim reminder of how dangerous the territory is. Agnes timidly welcomes them back, while Marielle warmly says she is grateful the two of them returned safely. One of the sisters warns that the monsters have been acting strangely and says they may need to prepare for a large-scale invasion, but the armored woman tells her not to worry yet and says they will deal with it when the time comes. The two warriors pause in confusion, but Agnes suddenly cuts in and says that can wait because an urgent decree has arrived from Her Majesty the Queen. The scene shifts indoors as the women gather in a formal room beneath the shadow of the Cuvelier estate to discuss the royal order. One of them angrily protests that even the House of Cuvelier, the kingdom's shield, is being treated lightly, and she snaps that calling this a reward is absurd because it is nothing but a heap of trouble dumped on them. Marielle reflects that while finding a husband is the highest priority for their territory, accepting the notorious Evan as a groom is an entirely different matter. The other woman remarks that the royal court probably sees it as a favor because he is still the son of a high-ranking noble. Marielle flatly points out that he is also, technically, the legitimate heir of a duke's house. Marielle explains that House Cuvelier is, at least in name, a high-ranking noble family, so they can only arrange marriages with duke-level houses or above. She adds that their land is constantly threatened by monsters, and because the territory is so dangerous, every marriage proposal so far has been rejected by the other side. Another woman bluntly says that if Evan resists, they can just force him into obedience and make him do his duty. The cheerful girl right away agrees and says he is not being sent there as punishment anyway, so they might as well treat him like property. Marielle calmly notes that she has heard Evan Verlaine hates women, then proposes banning him from marrying anyone else, keeping him confined, and forcing him to do his duty. With a cold smile, she concludes that for an unmarried noble like him, that arrangement should suit him perfectly. The scene shifts to Evan in confinement as he reflects that no one would believe him even if he said he had been reincarnated into another world. He recalls that all he remembers is dying after being crushed by a bookshelf during an earthquake, then being reborn in another world. He bitterly realizes it even began with the classic broken engagement setup, and he wonders if becoming a villain heir really means he is trapped in that kind of story. A bespectacled woman explains that, according to Renee, this world follows an automy game, while Evan is stunned that before he can even grasp the situation, he is already being married into a Margrave family. Evan struggles to make sense of his situation and wonders why he was reincarnated into a game world he never even played. He bitterly thinks this outcome is still easier than being thrown into some grand quest like defeating a demon king, and he notes that there are at least a few advantages. He reveals that after reincarnating, he gained a cheat-like power that lets him read the thoughts of anyone he touches. He adds that all the women around him are unbelievably beautiful, which makes him suspect even more strongly that this really is an automy game world. When a female prison guard appears, Evan assumes she is probably just some background extra, yet he is stunned that even a guard looks unusually polished. His gaze lingers on her, and he becomes visibly flustered by the situation. The guard catches him staring and directly asks what he is looking at, throwing him completely off balance. Evan freezes in panic and can barely force out a response as the tension spikes in an instant. The guard teases him with a smile, calling him young master and asking if he is staring at her a little too much. Completely embarrassed, Evan hurriedly insists he was not looking and blurts out that a girl should not say things like that. The guard wonders why he is acting so shocked when, to her, this much seems perfectly normal. She reflects that she only meant to tease him a little, and his reaction makes her suspect the rumors that he dislikes women may not have been true after all. Evan is overwhelmed as he thinks she is openly crossing boundaries, while he panics and blurts out in disbelief that the women in this world cannot all be like this. With a playful smile, the guard says that if he wants, she will even let him make contact, pointing out that he clearly seems interested. Evan stares at her in shock and realizes he actually can, leaving him completely stunned. Looking embarrassed but still going along with it, the guard hesitantly tells him to go ahead. Evan spirals inwardly, thinking this is something he never experienced in his previous life, and the pressure of the moment nearly overwhelms him. The guard is shaken by the fact that a man in this world would want that kind of contact, and the interaction turns intensely awkward. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. Realizing she seems to be enjoying his flustered reaction, Evan is left stunned and thinks the whole situation has become completely unreal. Flushed and nervous, the guard boldly asks how she seems to him, and Evan stammers that she looks amazing. When Evan reacts awkwardly, she tells him not to think women are disgusting and reminds him that he is the one acting strangely. Trying to explain himself, Evan awkwardly says he heard that people deprived of close maternal affection can grow unusually fixated on this kind of contact, leaving her confused. As the tension lingers in the corridor, Evan thinks he was still incredibly lucky. The guard shyly admits that for a low-ranking girl like her, getting this kind of attention from a man almost never happens. Evan finally realizes why she had seemed so pleased and is shocked all over again by how extreme the 1 man to 99 women imbalance really is. Hesitant and still trying to understand, Evan asks whether that means she would have been happy even with less direct contact. She brightly tells him that of course she would, adding that if she tried to seek out a handsome man like him in that kind of place, her entire yearly pay would vanish at once. Laughing, the guard says Evan really knows nothing about this world, then explains that such places are expensive because there are so few men. Still blushing, she pauses and signals that there's something else she wants to say. The guard excitedly says the rumors were true, praising Evan for being kind even to someone like her, and saying he does not act superior at all, while Evan awkwardly starts to protest that he is basically a captive. Blushing, she adds that this is not all and reminds him that he even made contact with her, which only makes the moment more uncomfortable. As their hands meet through the bars, she softly calls out to him as her young master. Gathering her courage, the guard asks whether he would escape together with her. Startled, Evan asks if she means running away and warns that she will be in trouble too if she does that. She insists she does not want someone like him to go through this, saying she heard the Cuvelier family are harsh and that if he goes there he will be treated terribly. Holding on to him, she says she knows they live in different worlds and that, unlike him, she has hidden motives and may have done something terrible. Even so, she says she still wants to help him somehow. When Evan gently pats her head, she breaks down in overwhelmed gratitude and thanks him for worrying about her. Evan quickly apologizes and worries that he upset her, then reflects that he ended up treating her like the child who used to visit the library. Evan is shaken by her offer and thinks he never wanted to drag a kind girl like her into something like this. The girl insists she will be fine and says the danger at the frontier might only be a rumor, but she still cannot leave him here. Another girl nervously says that if he stays here for now, she will do everything she can to make sure Evan is comfortable. Before anything else can be said, a sudden crashing sound shatters the moment. A woman arrives to find René Laforêt calmly seated before Evan's cell with drinks and gifts, while attendants stand nearby. Staring at the absurd sight, she bluntly asks what exactly is going on here. Flustered, Evan explains that after meeting him, the guards started spreading all kinds of favorable rumors about him, and as promised, he has been living surprisingly comfortably. Since then, presents have been pouring in non-stop along with rumors calling Evan a good person, warning that headpats are dangerous, and treating the whole thing like a strange craze. The women soon began asking for headpats themselves, and the scene turned oddly familiar despite the prison bars between them. Evan realizes in disbelief that his habit of patting their heads seems to have started an entirely new obsession in this world, and he is baffled by what kind of prison security this even is. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. The woman abruptly announces that they are leaving, then says there is something more important to deal with. She reveals that Her Highness has been pushing for this, and when Evan reacts in shock, she makes it clear the decision was never sudden on their side. The girl quietly says she understands, and Evan thanks her for being so understanding. Evan says he has no ties to this world, so wherever he goes would make no real difference to him. A carriage sets out with guards and attendants as the group leaves the prison behind and heads toward a distant estate. Inside the carriage, one woman notes that they are not even trying to hide their intentions, while Evan sits beside her in uneasy silence. She observes that despite escorting the son of a high-ranking noble, his protection amounts to only 4 knights and a few mercenaries. Looking at the hired guards, she concludes that Her Highness must truly despise that man. Evan reflects that this kind of treatment was still at least a proper send-off, while the woman falls into thoughtful silence. The woman remarks that it had been a slight hold, while Evan reacts in confused embarrassment. Someone explains that they will keep traveling by carriage for the next few days, and warns Evan to take care since the roads are rough and there will be no smooth suspension. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. The carriage continues across the water, and Evan can only hope the rough travel does not get any worse. At a distant castle, news arrives that Evan Verlaine has departed for the frontier. Hearing the report, the seated woman calmly acknowledges it and takes it in without surprise. Another woman says the prison guards behaved inappropriately and made a shameless spectacle right up until Evan was sent off, adding that the hatred directed at him is almost astonishing. The seated woman repeats the report with quiet interest, then remarks that it must have been quite an ordeal for a man known to dislike women. She orders a messenger to be sent to the Marquis and says a personal gift should be delivered on her behalf.